It was a Saturday morning that smelled like freshly cut grass and possibility. Or maybe just fertilizer from Mr. Henderson's prize-winning roses next door. Either way, I was in my element, buffing Bartholomew with a microfiber cloth. Bartholomew Barty, to his friends, was the star cherub of my magnificent three-tiered garden fountain. Okay, magnificent might be stretching it. Clearance sale special from questionable garden emporium might be more accurate. But damn it, I loved that thing. Barty himself looked less like a Renaissance angel and more like a constipated baby contemplating the mysteries of the universe, or possibly just bad plumbing. He presided over two smaller, equally bewildered-looking cherubs, all perched precariously on faux stone basins. The solar panel, bless its heart, usually needed the concentrated power of a small star to coax more than a gentle dribble from Barty's urn? Mouth? Honestly, the anatomy was ambiguous. But when it did work, the gentle splash-splosh was my own little slice of suburban zen. My fortress against the beige tyranny of the Homeowners Association. Okay, yeah, maybe Bartholomew looks a little pained, I muttered, polishing a suspicious green smudge off his cheek. And maybe the pump sounds like a hamster fighting a tiny outboard motor. But it's my hamster motor symphony. It ties the whole yard together, you know? Mr. Henderson shuffled over to his side of the low hedge separating our domains, adjusting his ancient gardening hat. Morning, Gary. Quite a water feature you've got there. His tone was carefully neutral, the kind you use when acknowledging a relative's truly unfortunate tattoo. Thanks, Mr. H., I beamed, choosing to interpret quite a water feature as a stunning testament to landscape artistry. Just giving Barty his weekly shine. Mr. Henderson just nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on Barty's grimace. Right then, keep up the shining. He retreated back towards his impeccably pruned roses, leaving me and Bartholomew to our mutual appreciation society. Life was good, simple, appropriately hydrated, at least in my front yard. I hadn't counted on the impending drought of joy, brought on by Hurricane Brenda. Later that afternoon, the zen was shattered. I was enjoying a lukewarm beer on the porch swing, watching the fountain achieve a respectable trickle thanks to a rare alignment of the sun, the solar panel, and possibly a passing satellite. That's when I saw her. Brenda. Marching across the street with the determined stride of a drill sergeant inspecting barracks. Trailing behind her, bouncing on its leash like an angry cotton ball, was Precious, her Pomeranian, whose tiny brain seemed to contain only yapping algorithms and existential rage. Brenda stopped dead on the sidewalk opposite my fountain. Her perfectly coiffed blonde helmet of hair barely moved, but I saw the finger emerge. The dreaded pointing finger of judgment. Oh, here we go. She crossed my lawn. Yes, my lawn. Another clear HOA violation, if I recall. Section 4, subsection C about neighborly foot traffic. And planted herself in front of me, hands on hips. Precious commenced yapping, a sound like tiny needles stabbing my eardrums. Gary, Brenda began, her voice managing to be both sharp and syrupy, like lemon juice mixed with cheap corn syrup. What is that monstrosity? I swung gently. It's a fountain, Brenda. You know, water, cascades, little fat baby statue, decorative. It is not compliant, she declared, ignoring my helpful explanation. Section 7, subsection B, paragraph 4, clearly states, all lawn ornaments must be tasteful and harmonious with the neighborhood aesthetic. She waved a hand vaguely. That thing is neither. My internal monologue kicked into overdrive. Tasteful? Lady, you have a collection of garden gnomes dressed as golfers flanking your bird bath. One of them is attempting a sand trap shot near your prize-winning azaleas. Let's not throw stones from glass houses decorated by the live, laugh, love section of a discount home goods store. Outwardly, I tried reason. Come on, Brenda, it's pretty quiet, and I think it's tasteful. I gestured at Barty. Look, he's cherubic. It's an eyesore, Gary. And the noise… She tilted her head as if listening to a distant foghorn, though the fountain was currently producing less noise than Precious's furious panting. It's disruptive. I'm filing an official complaint with the Beautification Committee. Which she chaired, naturally. You do that, Brenda? I took a sip of my beer. She huffed, spun on her sensible heel, and marched back across the street, Precious yapping in triumphant retreat. Later, I recounted the incident to Leo over the phone. Dude, he said after he stopped laughing. You know Brenda. She doesn't let things go. This is like poking a bear. It's a fountain, Leo, not a grizzly attack. With Brenda, he warned, the difference is purely semantic. Just be careful. I shrugged it off. How much trouble could one slightly tacky fountain cause? Famous last words. A few days later, the official-looking envelope arrived. Cream-colored, slightly menacing, with the HOA logo embossed in the corner. Inside, couched in impenetrable legalese, was the demand, cease and desist operation of non-compliant water feature, NCWF, and remove said NCWF within 7 days due to violations of aesthetic integrity mandates, AIM, and auditory disturbance protocols, ADP. NCWF? AIM? ADP? It sounded like a bad sci-fi plot. I crumpled the letter, then immediately uncrumpled it, smoothing it out. This was serious. Brenda wasn't bluffing. My appeal was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening, held, as always, in the overly cluttered garage of HOA President Bob Peterson. Bob was a man whose spine seemed to have been surgically replaced with lukewarm jello. The board consisted of Bob, a perpetually confused woman named Carol, and Brenda herself, naturally recused from voting, but definitely not from presenting her evidence. I arrived armed with a heartfelt plea about the fountain's therapeutic qualities, and some blurry photos I claimed showed similar fountains in upscale magazines, found via a desperate Google search for classy cherub fountain, which yielded surprisingly few results. Leo came for moral support, occasionally nodding solemnly when I mentioned things like hydroaesthetic harmony. Then came Brenda's presentation. She had laminated photos of my fountain taken from unflattering angles, highlighting supposed rust spots, character, and mineral deposits, authenticity. She had printouts of the HOA rulebook with lurid pink highlighter marking Section 7B. She even had a decibel meter app, reading she claimed proved the fountain exceeded noise limits. Taken, I suspect, while Precious was having one of her fits right next to it. This structure, she intoned, gesturing at a particularly grainy photo of Barty, lowers property values. It projects an image incongruous with the established community standards. It attracts squirrels, the board murmured. Squirrels, the horror! Bob cleared his throat. Well, Gary, Brenda makes some points. The rules are rather clear. But it's just a fountain, I protested. It makes people happy. Okay, it makes me happy. Happiness, unfortunately, is not specifically addressed in the bylaws, Carol chirped helpfully. The vote was swift. Removal mandated, 7 days. I walked out of that garage, feeling like my small, water feature-loving soul had been crushed by beige bureaucracy. Defeat tasted like stale beer and garage fumes, and simmering, impotent rage. 7 days later, Barty and his brethren lay in pieces in my garage, surrounded by disconnected tubing and a faint aura of failure. I was slumped on an overturned bucket, staring mournfully at the cherub's detached head. It still looked constipated. Maybe it saw this coming. Leo showed up, a 6-pack of craft beer under his arm. the universal symbol for dude that sucks. We sat in near silence for a bit, the only sound the depressing hum of the garage freezer. "It's just so unfair," I finally mumbled, poking Barty's nose. "All that joy silenced by the fun police." "She really is something else," Leo agreed, popping open 2 bottles. "Obsessed with control." "I just wish," I sighed, taking a long pull of beer. "I wish I could just give her a taste of her own medicine. Something she can't control, something annoying." Leo chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah, man, you should replace it with something really annoying. Like, I don't know." He waved his beer bottle vaguely towards the yard. "Like a geyser that only goes off when she walks by?" He laughed. I didn't. I slowly lowered my beer. An image bloomed in my mind. Brenda, mid-stride, suddenly engulfed in an unexpected plume of water. The sheer, beautiful, petty justice of it. "Wait," I said, my voice quiet. "Say that again?" Leo's smile froze. He saw the look in my eyes, the slightly unhinged glint that surfaces when my passive aggression meets a viable engineering challenge. "No," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "Bad Gary, I was kidding. Absolutely 100% joking. Do not weaponize your plumbing." But it was too late. The seed wasn't just planted. It had already sprouted, unfurling leaves of malicious ingenuity. A geyser. Triggered by Brenda. Operation Soggy Bottom was unofficially born. My grief transformed into focused energy. Late nights were spent bathed in the glow of my monitor, diving deep into the questionable corners of the internet, where DIY water cannons and overly elaborate sprinkler systems were discussed. Motion sensor? Too crude. It'd nail the mailman, kids on bikes, maybe even Mr. Henderson retrieving his newspaper. Unacceptable collateral damage? Timer? Brenda was punctual, but not that punctual. A few minutes off and I'd just be watering the empty sidewalk. Facial recognition? Tempting. Oh, so tempting. Imagine training an AI on Brenda's signature scowl. But the tech was beyond my budget and probably my skills. Plus, the data privacy implications felt iffy, even for revenge. No, it needed to be specific, elegant, deniable. I started observing. Brenda's walks were clockwork. 8:15 a.m., 5:45 p.m., rain or shine. She always walked on the sidewalk across the street. And, eureka! She always paused at the exact same spot, roughly parallel to my prize-winning, participation ribbon-winning, azalea bush, to adjust Precious's tiny, ridiculous sweater or leash. It was a small hesitation, barely noticeable, but consistent. The plan formed. Forget pressure plates or lasers. I'd use a narrow-beam motion sensor, strategically hidden, and aimed precisely at that spot. But the key was the timing. I'd rig it to a programmable timer. The sensor would only be active for a 10-minute window around 8:15 a.m. and 5:45 p.m. Outside those times, inert plastic. Plausible deniability was key. Faulty sprinkler controller officer. Terribly unreliable things, you know. The online orders began. A high-pressure submersible pump advertised for dramatic water features. A 12-volt solenoid valve, quick-acting, industrial-grade, maybe overkill, but this was war. A surprisingly sophisticated sprinkler timer with multiple program options, yards of flexible PVC tubing, waterproof electrical boxes, and crucially, one narrow-beam infrared motion sensor. My text chain with Leo became increasingly alarming, for him. Me. Found a valve used in industrial car washes, rated for 500 psi. Leo, dude, stop. Me. Think of the velocity, the sheer surprise. Leo. Promise me you won't take her eye out. Me. Cross my heart. Aiming for damp annoyance, not permanent disfigurement lawsuit. Probably. Leo. That probably is doing a lot of heavy lifting right now. My internal monologue was a happy hum of scheming. If Brenda thinks my fountain was tacky, wait till she gets a face full of repurposed sprinkler parts, powered entirely by spite, and a worrying amount of water pressure. The next week was a blur of clandestine activity, mostly under the cover of darkness or during Brenda's infrequent shopping trips. Digging shallow trenches across the lawn became essential sprinkler system maintenance, according to the sign I helpfully propped up. Burying the pump in a waterproof container near the azalea bush was just aerating the soil. Wiring the sensor and valve felt like defusing a bomb, except I built the bomb. I housed the electronics in what I hoped was a genuinely waterproof box hidden under the thickest part of the bush. "Hope this cheap plastic holds up better than Barty's left wing," I muttered, tightening a gasket. There were setbacks. Testing the pump resulted in me accidentally jet washing a family of robins out of the nearby oak tree. Sorry, robins. Hope you find a drier nest. Miswiring the timer caused it to short out with a pathetic fizz and a puff of smoke. $30 down the drain. Note to self, red is not always positive. While burying the main pipe, I nearly brained myself with the shovel when I hit an unexpected rock. Saw stars, briefly considered abandoning the whole plan. Then I pictured Brenda's smug face and soldiered on. Leo occasionally helped, mostly by holding the flashlight and muttering things like, "This is insane! You're going to jail, and is that even legal?" "Perfectly legal," I assured him, wiping mud off my face. "It's just innovative landscaping." Hiding the nozzle was the final challenge. It needed to be virtually invisible, but positioned perfectly. I ended up buying a hideously fake resin rock, the kind meant to cover wellheads or septic tank lids. I drilled a hole through it, fitted the nozzle inside, and placed it amongst other, genuinely real rocks near the edge of the lawn. It looked almost natural, if you squinted, and had questionable taste in rocks. Which, let's face it, described most suburban landscaping. One evening, while I was delicately arranging pebbles around the fake rock, Brenda actually came out to get her mail. My heart hammered. I froze. Pretending to be intensely interested in a dandelion, she glanced over, her eyes narrowing slightly, but apparently my man fascinated by weed performance was convincing enough. She retreated indoors. Close call. Internal monologue. Almost compromised the mission for a common lawn weed. Stay focused, Gary. Remember the fountain. Remember the squirrels. With everything installed, the moment of truth arrived. Testing. This couldn't happen during Brenda's actual walk times. Too risky. It had to be late night. "Okay, Leo," I whispered into a walkie-talkie. "Overkill? Never." Crouching behind the azalea bush like a garden ninja. "Operation BrendaBot 3000 is commencing. Walk the path, and try to look disapproving." Leo, sighing heavily, shuffled onto the sidewalk across the street. He was wearing my spare gardening hat pulled low as a disguise. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever done." His voice crackled back. "If your geyser breaks my ankle, I'm suing." Noted. Approaching the sweater adjustment zone. Engage sensor now. I flipped the switch on my remote bypass. A pathetic spurt of water arched about 2 feet and landed harmlessly on the pavement near Leo's shoe. "That's it?" Leo's voice was laced with disappointment. "All that work for a glorified drinking fountain?" "Calibration issues," I hissed back. "Not enough spite in the system. Adjusting the, hydraulic pressure." After fiddling with the pump settings and nozzle angle, we tried again. This time, I used a long pole with a cardboard cutout of Brenda's approximate height taped to it. Leo refused further participation in live target practice. Whoosh! A massive blast of water shot straight up, easily 15 feet in the air, before crashing down and soaking me. Completely. "Okay," I sputtered, wiping water from my eyes. Maybe less spite? It took another hour of tweaking, adjusting the sensor range, the timer duration, just a quick, surprising 3-second burst, the water pressure, the nozzle angle. I needed it startling, drenching, aimed perfectly at someone standing exactly where Brenda always paused, but not powerful enough to knock her toupee, I suspected, into the next county. Finally, around 2 a.m., we achieved it. A targeted, satisfying whoomp of water that arced perfectly, saturated the Brenda zone, and then vanished. My internal monologue was humming with satisfaction. It needs to be sudden, startling, wet, the aquatic equivalent of a jump scare, perfect. Okay, Leo said, peering at the damp sidewalk. I have to admit that's kind of impressive, and terrifying, mostly terrifying. Terrifyingly awesome, I corrected, already setting the timer for 5:40 p.m. the next day. Showtime. 5:43 p.m. the next day. The air in my living room was thick with anticipation. Leo paced behind the couch, chewing his thumbnail. I was glued to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds, heart thumping like a drum solo. The system was armed. The timer was ticking. Any second now, I breathed. I feel like we should have popcorn, Leo muttered nervously. Or bail money. Right on cue, Brenda's front door opened. Out she stepped, followed by the perpetually outraged Precious. She started her walk, ramrod straight, scanning the neighborhood for infractions. My breath hitched. She crossed the street. She approached the zone. Come on, baby, I whispered to the hidden geyser. Do your thing. She reached the exact spot. Paused. Reached down to adjust Precious's tiny plaid bow tie. Seriously. Her mouth was moving, probably complaining about something into her phone headset. This was it. I mentally counted down. 3, 2, 1. Whoosh! It was glorious. A perfect plume of water erupted from the innocuous fake rock, catching Brenda completely mid-rant. It wasn't a fire hose blast, but a sudden, voluminous geyser spray that engulfed her from the waist up. Her reaction was cinematic gold. A startled shriek that was abruptly cut off as water hit her face. Sputtering, arms flailing, hair plaster instantly dissolving. Precious went berserk, barking and spinning in confused circles, getting tangled in his own leash. Silence hung in my living room for a split second, then Leo let out a choked snort, clamping a hand over his mouth. I felt a grin stretch across my face, so wide it almost hurt. Pure, unadulterated, watery triumph. Oh my God, Leo wheezed, tears forming in his eyes from suppressed laughter. You actually did it. She looks like a drowned rat. Operation Soggy Bottom is a go, I whispered back, voice tight with glee. Brenda stood there, dripping, momentarily stunned into silence. Then came the incoherent, sputtering rage, audible even through the closed window. What? What in the HOA-violating hell was that? Windows and doors up and down the street started opening, heads poked out. Mr. Henderson appeared on his porch, looking utterly bewildered. Quick, I hissed, pulling Leo down below the windowsill. Act natural. Which was difficult when you were shaking with laughter, like a malfunctioning washing machine. My internal monologue was playing a victory fanfare, the sound of pure, unadulterated fury mixed with dripping water. It's like Beethoven's Fifth, but wetter and funnier. Brenda, resembling a particularly outraged sea creature, spun around, trying to locate the source of the aquatic assault. She peered at the sky. She glared at my lawn. She poked suspiciously at the damp sidewalk. Precious, having recovered slightly, resumed his frantic yapping at the offending wet spot. Finding no obvious culprit, her gaze fixed, laser-like, on my house. Oh yes, here it comes. She stomped across the street, leaving damp footprints on the pavement, and began hammering on my front door with surprising force. Deep breaths, I told myself. Innocent face, concerned neighbor face. I smoothed my shirt, pasted on a look of mild curiosity, and opened the door. "Gary!" she shrieked, pointing a dripping finger. Water ran down her face, smearing her mascara. "Did you see that? Some kind of sprinkler malfunction. It soaked me right out of nowhere. It must have been your system." I widened my eyes in mock horror. "Brenda, good heavens, are you okay? You're drenched. Sprinkler malfunction? That's terrible. What happened?" I peered past her towards my lawn with feigned concern. "That's odd. Mine haven't been working right lately. The pressure's been all over the place. Maybe it was a sudden surge. Let me just check my controller." I made a vague gesture towards the garage. Leo popped up beside me, nodding vigorously. "Yeah, Brenda. Weird pressure issues all over the neighborhood. I heard Mrs. Gable complaining yesterday. Pipes must be getting old." His performance was only slightly undermined by the tremor of laughter in his voice. Brenda stared at us, droplets clinging to her eyelashes. Suspicion warred with confusion on her face. She knew. She had to know. But she couldn't prove a thing. It came from your lawn," she insisted, though less forcefully now. "From my lawn? Goodness, I hope not. I'll have to get that checked out immediately. Wouldn't want any other unexpected soakings." I infused my voice with neighborly concern. Internal monologue. Maintain eye contact, look concerned, resist urge to ask if Precious enjoyed his bath, must not smirk. Defeated for the moment, Brenda just made a frustrated noise, tugged Precious away from sniffing my doormat, and squelched back towards her house, muttering about incompetence and faulty plumbing. Victory, round 1. Brenda, predictably, did not let it go. The next afternoon, HOA President Bob Peterson and a very reluctant-looking Mr. Henderson appeared on my doorstep. Brenda hovered behind them on the sidewalk, arms crossed, radiating accusation. "Gary," Bob began hesitantly, consulting a clipboard. "Brenda has lodged a, formal complaint regarding an unscheduled water discharge event originating from your property." "Goodness," I exclaimed. "That sounds serious. Please, come take a look. I checked the system myself, but maybe you gentlemen can spot something I missed." I led them on a tour of my perfectly normal, entirely standard sprinkler heads. I pointed out the controller box in the garage, explaining its temperamental nature. When we got near the azalea bush and the infamous fake rock, I held my breath. Mr. Henderson peered at the rock, then at the bush. "Everything looks pretty standard here, Bob," he said, his voice gravelly. He glanced at me, and I could have sworn I saw the faintest twinkle in his eye. "These things malfunction sometimes, you know. Hard water buildup, pressure fluctuations." "It was deliberate," Brenda insisted from the sidewalk. "It targeted me. I was standing right there." "Brenda," I said, adopting a tone of gentle reason. "Why would my sprinkler target you? Does it hold a grudge? Maybe it disapproves of your petunias." Bob looked flustered. Mr. Henderson coughed, a sound suspiciously like a suppressed chuckle. Just then, a fat squirrel darted out from under the azalea bush, right across the sensor's hidden path. My blood ran cold. I subtly shifted my weight, nudging a hidden kill switch I'd installed near the base of the bush with my shoe. Nothing happened. The geyser remained silent. Internal monologue. Disaster averted. Okay, Henderson's cool. Or maybe just enjoys seeing Brenda flustered. Almost blew it with that squirrel, though. Note to self. Add squirrel detection override, possibly involving tiny squirrel-sized umbrella deployment. Bob shrugged helplessly at Brenda. "Doesn't seem to be anything amiss, Brenda. Probably just a freak occurrence." They retreated, leaving Brenda fuming silently on the sidewalk. Round 2. Gary. The geyser didn't activate every time. That would be too obvious, but it activated enough. Sometimes a full soaking, sometimes just a startling whoosh that made her jump and yelp. Brenda became a creature of pure paranoia. She started varying her walk times by a few minutes. She'd approach my section of sidewalk with extreme caution, peering into bushes, scanning my windows. Once, I swear I saw her poke the fake rock with a long stick. I watched, hidden behind my curtains, sipping my coffee and enjoying the show immensely. She took to carrying a large umbrella, rain or shine, holding it like a shield whenever she passed my house. Precious seemed perpetually anxious, whining and pulling away from the splash zone. I, meanwhile, may have indulged in some minor, deniable psychological warfare, programming my actual sprinklers to turn on for precisely 10 seconds whenever her car pulled into her driveway. Coincidence? Absolutely. The Phantom Geyser of Elm Street, as someone dubbed it, became neighborhood lore. Kids whispered about it. Adults exchanged amused glances. I overheard snippets of conversation at the mailbox. "Did you see Brenda with that giant golf umbrella yesterday? Not a cloud in the sky." "My Timmy swears he saw water shoot out of Gary's rock again." "Place your bets, folks. $10 says she gets hit before Friday." Leo remained my nervous conscience. "She's going to get video evidence, Gary. She's going to set up cameras. You're playing with fire, well, water." "Relax," I told him, calibrating a new random short burst setting on the timer. "My camouflage is flawless. It's a rock, Leo. Who suspects a rock?" Internal monologue. Mission accomplished. She now views my lawn not as pristine suburbia, but as a hostile, potentially damp territory. My work here is almost done. Then, gradually, things shifted. Maybe the constant vigilance was exhausting. Maybe the umbrella was messing with her hairdo. Maybe she just gave up. Brenda started walking Precious on the opposite side of the street. A wide berth, a clear zone of non-engagement. She still shot daggers with her eyes whenever she saw me, but the direct confrontations, the HOA complaints about water events, ceased. One quiet evening, I was out front, genuinely watering my petunias with a hose like a normal person. Brenda pulled into her driveway across the street. She got out, collected her mail. We locked eyes. A long moment passed. No words, no gestures, just a silent, grudging acknowledgement across the asphalt divide. She knew. I knew she knew. She knew I knew she knew. But the geyser remained silent. I'd put it on standby. Victory declared, weapon holstered for now. I finished watering, coiled the hose, and headed inside. A sense of profound, slightly ridiculous satisfaction washed over me. My internal monologue did a final wrap-up. Okay, maybe installing a semi-sentient water cannon triggered by my neighbor wasn't the absolute peak of maturity. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was borderline certifiable. But admit it, Bartholomew, I mentally addressed the dismembered cherub head still sitting on my garage workbench. It was funny. And hey, she hasn't mentioned the height of my grass or the precise shade of my recycling bin in weeks. Is this peace? Probably not. It's more like a ceasefire. A damp, awkward, hilarious ceasefire. I leaned back in my chair, already scanning online drone forums. You know, just for aerial photography purposes, definitely not for precision water balloon delivery. Probably.